The Flight of the Decadent Daughter, or The Mother's Story. The new kind of being heralded in the Passion of New Eve might, at first glance at least, appear to be given form in the figure of Fevers, the winged bird woman of Nights at the Circus. Located at the fag end, the smoldering cigar butt of a 19th century which is just about to be ground out in the ashtray of history, Nights at the Circus is profoundly concerned with historical change and the new. For Paulina Palmer, Fevers, with her miraculous wings, represents a key shift away from the image of the coated mannequin that marked Carter's earlier fiction to the celebratory bird woman, courageously exploring new realms, both personal and political. In contrast to the modes of suffering and automated femininity represented by, for example, Ghislaine and Annabelle, Fevers saturates herself with fetishistic myths about female sexuality and adapts them to assert her own sexual agency. Rejecting a birth by the normal channels, she constructs her genesis from a dust-covered Titian depicting the myth of Leda and the swan. I always saw, as through a glass, darkly, what might have been my own primal scene, my own conception, the heavenly bird in a white majesty of feathers descending with imperious desire upon the half-stunned and yet herself impassioned girl. In reimagining her coming into being through this image, one that directly recast the depiction of Melanie's rape by the mechanical swan in the magic toy shop, Fevers takes on the bird-like quality. What? Fevers. Her body subsequently becomes a site on to which multiple and often conflicting images of the woman with wings become inscribed. She is by turns and often at once the winged Victory, l'Ange Anglais, a reference that links her to Sade's Madame de Saint-Ange, W.B. Yeats' Golden Bird, and Guillaume Apollinaire's Winged Woman. While the novel is replete with allusions and references drawn from diverse literary and cultural spheres, its French literary inheritance is especially striking. In her notes for Nights at the Circus, for example, Carter identifies Eugénie Sue's Le Mystère de Paris and Louis Aragon's Le Paysan de Paris as literary context for the novel. From the beginning of the narrative, Fevers' position as a performer is one inflected by Parisian theater culture. Fevers, the most famous Aerialiste of her day, her slogan, "Is she fact or is she fiction?" And she didn't let you forget it for a minute. In this query, in the French language, in foot-high letters, blazed forth from a wall-sized poster, souvenir of her Parisian triumphs, dominating her London dressing room, attributed with deforming the dreams of that entire generation who would immediately commit themselves wholeheartedly to psychoanalysis, while in Vienna, Fevers causes something of a stir in Paris. Not just Lautrec, but all the post-impressionists vied to paint her. Willie gave her supper and she gave Colette some good advice. Alfred Jarry proposed marriage, constructing herself as figure of ultimate spectacularity, a compendium of cultural cliches, worn and soiled from circulation. Fevers births herself as a decadent daughter made up from bits of pieces drawn from the lumber room of the European Gothic imagination. Within the fin de siècle context of the novel setting, Fevers crafts herself more specifically as a pastiche of 19th century decadent Gothic inscriptions of femininity, playfully embodying iconographic representations of the decadent vamp and the figure of the female performer as a staple of male-authored fin de siècle literature, where it is often aligned with the figure of the prostitute and that of the mechanical woman. For example, her blonde hair and physical bulk link her to Miss Urania, the acrobat in Huysmans' Rebours, and, most strikingly, Emile Zola's Nana, La Blonde Venus, whose sexual and financial vampirism is linked to the political and moral destructiveness of the Second Empire. She also bears echoes of Juna Barnes' more playful representation of the female performer in the figure of Frau Mann, the androgynous acrobat in Nightwood, 1936. Sexually aware and economically independent, Fevers is associated with the New Woman as an anarchic figure who threatened to turn the world upside down and to be on top in a wild carnival of social and sexual rule. Her position as a new woman also emerges powerfully from the Sadian Gothic and, specifically, from Apollinaire's famous celebration of Sade's Juliet as an image of renewal, a being of whom nothing is yet known, detached from humanity, who will grow wings and renovate the universe. Carter explains to Anna Katsavos that one of the original ideas behind the creation of Fevers was a piece of writing by Guillaume Apollinaire in which he talks about Sade's Juliet. He's talking about a woman in the early 20th century in a very French and rhetorical manner. He's talking about the new woman, and the very phrase he uses is, "who will have wings and will renew the world." Carter had already discussed Apollinaire's celebration of Juliet in The Sadian Woman, but in Nights at the Circus, the image of the winged woman is brought to life, with all of its promise and its limitations, in the characterization of Fevers, who sees in her body the abode of limitless freedom. In endowing Fevers with wings, the text redeploys the image of flight from persecution that has been a critical feature of Gothic writing by women since the 18th century. However, this is not a straightforwardly transformative endeavor because, as Sage points out, the image of the woman with wings has served throughout the centuries as a carrier of men's meanings, a reservation that Carter also expresses about the deployment of the image of the winged woman by male intellectuals. Annie de Bruyne sounds another note of ambivalence about Apollinaire's definition of Juliet, which she suggests has too many wings and halos. There is a sense in which this celebratory vision of the winged woman is also caught up in representation. It becomes too emblematic. While Sage argues that Fevers makes meaning on her own account and evades the symbol hunters who try to murder, vitrify, petrify, and pin her down, Fevers' inhabiting of the iconography of the winged woman is more ambivalent. She appears to re-embody and give wings to the image of automated femininity by playing with the borderline between the mechanical and the fleshly body. For example, Walser, the journalist intent on revealing her winged body to be a hoax, wonders whether Fevers' voice had its source not within her throat but in some ingenious mechanism. Similarly, as part of his ludic game, Colonel Kearney spreads rumors that Fevers is not a woman at all, but a cunningly constructed automaton made up of whalebone, india rubber, and springs. However, as Carter acknowledges in The Sadian Woman, Sade's Juliet may give the illusion of agency and mobility, but she operates like a mechanical woman whose mind functions like a computer program to produce two results for herself: financial profit and libidinal gratification. It may be, then, that the corpulent, farting, gorging Fevers all too closely resembles Vaucanson's defecating duck or Edison's talking doll. Lizzie refers to Fevers as duck or ducky on several occasions. She may play with the image of the mechanical woman, but, time and time again, Fevers risks falling back into the machinery of this paternal invention, a risk made all too real by Rosenkreuz's attempts to sacrifice her to his cult of male virility and the Russian Grand Duke's desire to miniaturize her in a Fabergé egg. Although Nights at the Circus is often described as an exemplary postmodern, or, owing to its emphasis on performance and the circus, carnivalesque text, the prevalence of Sadian and decadent Gothic topographies also situates the novel within a European Gothic tradition. Indeed, while Sage suggests that this is a book with hardly any houses at all, the novel is replete with enclosing and oppressive Gothic interiors, from Ma Nelson's brothel and Madame Schreck's museum in London to Countess P's panopticon penitentiary in Siberia. It is precisely the relentless sense of claustrophobia in this text, argues Armitt, that signals its affinities with the Gothic mode. The Gothic interiors in Nights at the Circus may belong to the Sadian and decadent Gothic imagination, but the structure of the novel also has affinities with what Ellen Moores identifies as the female Gothic mode of traveling heroism, a mode concerned with the journey of the woman who moves, who acts, who copes with vicissitude and adventure. Still, while critical attention has tended to center on Fevers and the flight of the decadent daughter from the restrictive enclosures of male-authored scripts of femininity, the novel also shares with the female Gothic a focus on the maternal relation. Rather than foregrounding the concerns of the daughter over the mother, the dialogic narrative of Nights at the Circus, proposes Elaine Jordan, is also effectively a strong mother-daughter relation, that of Fevers and Lizzie, fond and ratty by turns. For although biologically motherless, Fevers' bird-like hatching out of a bloody great egg delivers her into the wholly female world of Ma Nelson's brothel to become the common daughter of half a dozen mothers. Her subsequent journey through the Gothic spaces of the narrative is mapped out via her encounter with various surrogate mothers, most notably Ma Nelson and Madame Schreck, but also her ongoing dialogue with her foster mother, the Marxist feminist Lizzie. Ma Nelson's academy is the primal Gothic space in which Fevers serves her apprenticeship in being looked at being the object of the eye of the beholder. It is here, with the guidance of her first surrogate mother, Ma Nelson, that Fevers is educated in the art of female performance as a fetishized object for a male gaze. Owing to her little feathery buds, she is dressed firstly as Cupid and sits in the alcove of the drawing room in which the ladies introduce themselves to the gentlemen, and secondly, following the onset of menstruation, in the costume of the winged Victory. Fevers' upbringing within a community of loving whores has been idealized by feminist readers, but Ma Nelson's brothel establishes an interior architecture that at once evokes and displaces the maternal body. The wine-red, figured damask inner wall of Nelson's vessel mimics the womb space. Echoing the Marquise's bloody chamber, Baudelaire's lonely apartment, and Mother's curtained cabinet, the brothel is an appropriation of a maternal Gothic space within which sex is everywhere, but biological motherhood is nowhere. It is a place constructed in and through cultural myths about femininity. Fevers even blames Baudelaire for the slow but sure waning of trade in the brothel. It is a place constructed in and through cultural myths about femininity. Fevers even blames Baudelaire for the slow but sure waning of trade in the brothel. I put it down to the influence of Baudelaire, sir. What's this? Cried Walser, amazed enough to drop his professional imperturbability. The French poet, sir, a poor fellow who loved whores not for the pleasure of it, but, as he perceived it, the horror of it. As if we was, not working women doing it for money, but damned souls who did it solely to lure men to their dooms. As if we got nothing better to do. An old, square, red brick house, old-fashioned to the extent that it had a way of seeming almost too modern for its own good. The brothel architecturally represents the glittering sterility of an ante-womb space, even if it is one that is underwritten by a subtext of fertility, thanks to the numerous feline inhabitants, often in kitten. The architecture of the brothel is mirrored by Ma Nelson's own self-stylization. Dressed in the full dress uniform of the eponymous admiral, Ma Nelson takes up the position of a male impersonator as she commands her ship of battle though sometimes she'd laugh and say it was a pirate ship and went under false colors. Identified as a suffragette, one for votes for women, Nelson is also a cross-dresser. In an act of authorial transvestism that echoes the various citational travesties that constitute the passion of New Eve, Maud Nelson borrows the words of Apollinaire to celebrate Fevers as the pure child of the century that just now is waiting in the wings, the new age in which no woman will be bound down to the ground. However, as a male impersonator, she participates in a broader economy of the spectacle, reproducing images of the Gothic daughter as a fantasy of the European Gothic imagination. Mary Russo proposes that Nights at the Circus is unique in its depiction of relationships between women as spectacle and women as producers of spectacle. While the brothel may be a subversive pirate ship insofar as it exploits the fetishization of the femme fatale for economical ends, its pseudo-familial counterculture is underpinned by male-authored definitions of femininity. Although Fevers claims her training in Nelson's brothel as the key to her later economic independence, or cupidity, its complicity with the commodification of women as spectacles for a male gaze means that her female body has currency only in relation to male sexuality. Nelson's male impersonation links her to the sterile phallic mother, who presides over a far more dangerous and macabre configuration of the Gothic castle, Madame Schreck and her Museum of Woman Monsters. With its claustrophobic architecture and sinister mise-en-scene of female sexuality, Madame Schreck's museum represents the Gothic centerpiece of the novel. Situated in a square with a melancholy garden in the middle full of worn grass and leafless trees, this Gothic castle is located in a barren Eden. Catering for those men who are not merely troubled in their bodies, but troubled in their souls, Schreck's museum evokes a horror-inspired, decadent view of female sexuality. This place was known as Down Below, or else the Abyss. The damask walls of Ma Nelson's brothel are replaced here by the living, grotesque bodies of Fevers and the other woman monsters who service Schreck's clients. The girls were all made to stand in stone niches cut out of the slimy walls, except for the sleeping beauty, who remained prone, since proneness was her speciality. And there were little curtains in front, and, in front of the curtains, a little lamp burning. These were her profane altars, as she used to call them. The macabre theatricality and perverse paraphernalia of Schreck's museum reiterate the image of tangled and mutilated bodies structuring the bestial room in the infernal desire machines of Dr. Hoffman. It is a space forged through the Sadian Gothic imagination. As Carter describes the Sadian woman, Sade creates a museum of woman monsters. He cuts up the bodies of women and reassembles them in the shapes of his own delirium. He renews all the ancient wounds, every one, and makes them bleed again as if they will never stop bleeding. The display of female bodies in Schreck's dungeon is also reminiscent of Charcot's spectacular display of female hysteria in his Museum of Living Pathology. Situating Carter's text firmly within the visual iconography of discourses of female hysteria, it brings to the fore late 19th century psychoanalysis in its most Gothic aspect. With her black dress, thick veil, and skinny, wizened bosom, Madame Schreck, Schrenken, in German meaning terror or fright, represents the Freudian ideal of post-Oedipal maternity by masquerading as death. She had some quality of the uncanny about her, over and above the illusion, so you did think that under those lugubrious garments of hers you might find nothing but some kind of wicked puppet that pulled its own strings. Drawn in the Gothic tradition of the monstrous feminine, she is cast in the role of the old hag or Lady Macbeth who, as Elizabeth A. Fay describes, replaces the absent or dead good mother as the evil mother who focuses the Gothic. the monstrous woman whose desire for power allows her to manipulate the patriarchal law that should subdue her. She represents the Gothic dark side of Ma Nelson's appropriation of phallic power as a woman who acts according to the precepts and also the practice of a man's world, and so she does not suffer. Instead, she causes suffering. Concerned only with organizing and distributing images of other women for the visual market. Shrek's own disembodied presence, argues Rousseau, suggests the extreme immateriality and genderless politics. She may, as the narrator suggests, be only a hollow puppet, the body as performance in extremis. Toussaint, Madame Shrek's manservant, describes how, after her struggle with Fevers, she is completely disembodied. It came to me that there was nothing left inside the clothes, and perhaps there never had been anything. She was weightless as an empty basket, and her mittens fell to the floor with a soft plop. A little dust trickled out of the truncated fingers. Little more than a figure of speech, an embodiment of the monstrous feminine, Madame Shrek writes herself out of the historic world and turns to dust. She may represent the mother as a whole, but one into which she herself disappears. Although, by representing material excess, Fevers is cast as Shrek's antithesis. The two represent facets of the same Sadian economy. The daughter trades on her sexualized body. The surrogate mother denies her maternal body and writes herself out of history. Both, like Juliet, are materialists programmed to pursue financial profit at the expense of their humanity. Irigaray argues that, in order to re-embody the mother as a speaking subject, it is vital to reimagine the mother-daughter relationship so that mother and daughter can speak in the presence of one another. It is also necessary, if we are not to be accomplices in the murder of the mother, for us to assert that there is a genealogy of women, that we already have a history. Although Madame Shrek represents the monstrous Gothic mother who tries to discipline the Gothic daughter into subjection, Nights at the Circus imagines an alternative model for the Gothic mother and the mother-daughter relationship in the figure of Lizzie, a tiny, wizened, gnome-like apparition who might have been any age between 30 and 50, with snapping black eyes, sallow skin, and skimpy, decent black dress, white with dandruff. Lizzie resembles the spectral surrogate mother Madame Shrek. However, a witchy ex-whore, she is an embodied subject who has already left her mark on the past and is planning for the future. After watching a loving mother pigeon passing mute instructions to her young, Fevers and Lizzie together realize that Fevers' flight into womanhood requires that Lizzie take on the role of bird mother. This young creature cried out to me that she would not be what she must become, and, though her pleading moved me until tears blinded my own eyes, I knew that what will be must be, and so I pushed. Although the text's reimagining of the mother-daughter relationship is crucial to the daughter's journey of self-discovery, it is also vital to Lizzie's self-positioning. Believing the onset of Fevers' menstruation and the blossoming of her wings to be the annunciation of her menopause, Lizzie historicizes herself in relation to the mother-daughter relationship. Rousseau effectively conceptualizes the relationship between Lizzie and Fevers in terms of an intergenerational grotesque, suggesting it is through their dialectical relationship that the new becomes a possibility that already existed, a part of the aging body in process, rather than the property, like virginity, of a discrete and static place or identity. In Nights at the Circus, the mother-daughter relationship is central not only to the psychosexual development of the Gothic heroine, but also to reimagining the Gothic mother. Claire Kahane identifies the recuperation of the mother-daughter relationship as a key component of modern Gothic narratives by women. For if the older Gothic tradition involved an obscure exploration of female identity through a confrontation with a diffuse spectral mother, in modern Gothic, the spectral mother typically becomes an embodied actual figure. If the disavowal of their bodies positions Nelson and Shrek as diffuse spectral mothers, then Lizzie is very much the embodied actual figure who guides and re-educates Fevers through the later stages of her journey of self-discovery. When Fevers and Lizzie leave London and St. Petersburg and move into the snow-covered landscape of Siberia, a blank sheet of fresh paper, the text opens up a new imaginary space in which to reimagine the mother-daughter relationship outside of the heavily codified structures of the Gothic castle. What starts to take place in Siberia is a dialogue between mother and daughter that displaces the emphasis put on Fevers' story in the first two sections of the novel. In Siberia, Lizzie's Marxist ponderings on feminist futures and identities provide a provocative counterpoint to Fevers' own musings on her utopian future as a woman with wings who will herald the new age in which no women will be bound down to the ground. Fevers, the wayward daughter, sees herself as the new woman who will radically transform the social structure, envisaging a moment when the old world has turned on its axle so that the new dawn can dawn. Then, all the women will have wings the same as I. But Lizzie, her feminist foster mother, warns her that it's going to be more complicated than that. This old witch sees storms ahead, my girl. When I look to the future, I see through a glass darkly. You improve your analysis, girl, and then we'll discuss it. Lizzie cautions Fevers, who is intoxicated with vision, about the uncompromising faith she has in her emblematic status, and attempts to ground her in the economic and social realities of her existence. After all, in The Sadian Woman, Carter is unconvinced by the revolutionary promise of Juliet's freedom. With apologies to Apollinaire, I do not think I want Juliet to renew my world. But, her work of destruction complete, she will, with her own death, have removed a repressive and authoritarian superstructure that has prevented a good deal of the work of renewal. For, in spite of her wings, Fevers does not truly take flight from the Gothic castle and its imprisoning scripts of femininity. She may temporarily flee from various Gothic enclosures, Rosenkreuz's neo-Gothic mansion, Madame Schreck's Museum of Women Monsters, and the Russian Grand Duke's sterile hall, but at the end of the narrative she remains locked in the gaze of her heterosexual lover. She felt herself trapped forever in the reflection of Walser's eyes. For one moment, just one moment, Fevers suffered the worst crisis of her life. Am I fact or am I fiction? Am I what I know I am, or am I what he thinks I am? While Fevers becomes imprisoned in the architecture of her own fiction, Lizzie explores her freedom as a writing subject. Traveling alongside the Gothic daughter, she has been carrying on her own covert political journey, sending news of the struggle in Russia to comrades in exile, written in invisible ink, at the request of a spry little gent with a stash she met in the reading room of the British Museum. Oh! Besides this meeting with Marx, Lizzie is also a member of the Wollstonecraft and Goodwin Debating Society and is thus identified with that exemplary transgressive mother, Mary Wollstonecraft. In the end, then, it is Lizzie who truly dupes Walser as a reader of their stories. Carter's envoy at the end of Nights at the Circus should be read less as the sending on her way of the Gothic daughter than as Lizzie's envoi de lettres to comrades in exile via Walser. The novel promotes, in other words, a fiction of maternity that at once disrupts and secures the Gothic daughter's narrative flight. As Fevers suggests, her foster mother's story is a long history of exile and cunning, which will fill up 10 times more of Walser's notebooks than my story ever did. Unlike that of James Joyce's Artist, Lizzie's is not a story of silence, exile, and cunning. Freed from the European Gothic's fictions of paternity, the mutilating enclosures of the Sadian Gothic, and the dehumanizing iconographies of the decadent Gothic's womb-like havens, the Gothic mother is reinstated above ground in historical time. The mother is not only, as Ward Jouve suggests, the story under the story, she is the agent of the story.